In a busy neighborhood filled with shops, restaurants, and people going about their daily lives, Marcus Thompson was just another face in the crowd. A tall, broad-shouldered man with a calm demeanor, Marcus had worked hard all his life to provide for his family. He was a security guard by profession but dreamed of something bigger, to become a police officer. It wasn't just about wearing the uniform, it was about making a difference in his community. But on this particular evening, everything would change. Marcus had finished his shift at a nearby mall and was walking home. The sun was setting, casting long shadows across the streets. He carried a small bag of groceries in one hand and held his phone in the other, occasionally glancing at messages from his wife. She had reminded him to pick up bread and milk, which he had done. As he turned onto a quieter street, lined with parked cars and old apartment buildings, he noticed two men standing near a patrol car. They didn't look like ordinary civilians. They were dressed casually, but their badges hung loosely around their necks. Off-duty cops. At first, Marcus thought nothing of it. He kept walking, minding his own business, when suddenly one of them called out to him, "Hey, stop right there!" Startled, Marcus froze. He looked over his shoulder, unsure if they were speaking to him. When he realized they were indeed pointing at him, he stopped and turned around. "Is something wrong?" he asked politely, trying to keep his tone calm despite feeling uneasy. The taller of the two officers approached him with a scowl. "You're under arrest," he said abruptly, grabbing Marcus's arm. Marcus pulled back instinctively. "What? Why? What did I do?" he demanded, confusion washing over him. The second officer stepped forward, crossing his arms. "Don't play dumb. You know exactly why we're here." Marcus shook his head vigorously. "No, I don't. I haven't done anything. You've got the wrong guy." But instead of listening, the officers grew more aggressive. One of them shoved Marcus against a nearby car while the other began frisking him roughly. Passers-by stopped to watch, some pulling out their phones to record what was happening. "This isn't right," a woman shouted. "That's not the person they're looking for." But the officers ignored her. To them, Marcus fit the vague description they'd heard earlier. A black man wearing a hoodie and jeans. Never mind that hundreds of people in the area could match that description. Never mind that Marcus hadn't resisted or shown any signs of hostility. In their eyes, he was guilty until proven innocent. As the altercation continued, Marcus tried reasoning with them again. "Please check my ID. My name is Marcus Thompson. I work at the mall down the block. I'm not who you think I am." His voice was firm but respectful, even as frustration bubbled inside him. Yet his words seemed to fuel their anger. One of the officers twisted his arm behind his back, causing him to wince in pain. "Shut up and stop resisting," the officer barked, though Marcus hadn't moved an inch since being pushed against the car. By now a small crowd had gathered. Some people shouted objections, while others recorded videos of the scene. A teenager yelled, "Leave him alone. He didn't do anything." An elderly man shook his head in disbelief. "This is ridiculous," he muttered. But none of this deterred the officers. If anything, they seemed determined to prove their authority, regardless of whether they had the right person. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, Marcus was cuffed and shoved into the back seat of the patrol car. His groceries lay scattered on the ground, forgotten. As the vehicle sped away, he stared out the window, replaying the events in his mind. How had things escalated so quickly? All he'd been doing was walking home. Now he found himself sitting in the back of a police car, accused of a crime he knew nothing about. At the station, Marcus was processed and placed in a holding cell. Despite his protests, no one listened. The officers refused to verify his identity or investigate further. Hours passed before a sergeant finally reviewed the case and realized they had made a grave mistake. By then, however, the damage was done. Marcus had spent the night in jail, humiliated and angry, wondering how such a thing could happen in broad daylight. When he was released the next morning, Marcus went straight home to his family. His wife hugged him tightly, tears streaming down her face. Their children clung to him, asking why Daddy had been taken away. Marcus didn't have the heart to explain fully. Instead, he promised them that everything would be okay. Deep down, though, he knew this wasn't just about him. It was about the countless others who had faced similar injustices. And as he sat at the kitchen table later that evening, staring at the bruises on his wrists, Marcus made a silent vow. He would not let this define him. Instead, he would use it as fuel to fight for change. Little did he know this incident would set the stage for a journey far greater than he could have imagined, one that would test his strength, challenge the system, and ultimately lead to a moment of reckoning neither he nor the arrogant officers could foresee. The days following Marcus's release from jail were a blur of emotions. Anger, frustration, and disbelief swirled inside him like a storm he couldn't calm. He replayed the incident over and over in his mind, trying to make sense of how something so unjust could happen. The worst part wasn't just the physical pain or the humiliation. It was the realization that the system meant to protect people like him had failed miserably. Instead of feeling safe, Marcus felt vulnerable, as if his identity as a black man made him a target rather than a citizen. But Marcus wasn't one to wallow in self-pity for long. After spending a day processing everything with his family, he decided to take action. He knew he couldn't let the officers' behavior go unchecked. If they could treat him this way, what stopped them from doing the same to someone else? With his wife's encouragement, Marcus filed a formal complaint against the department. It wasn't an easy process. There were forms to fill out, statements to write, and interviews to attend. But Marcus approached it with determination. Every step forward felt like reclaiming a piece of his dignity. Meanwhile, news of the incident began spreading through the neighborhood. Witnesses who had recorded videos of the altercation uploaded them online, sparking outrage across social media platforms. The footage showed Marcus calmly asking questions, only to be met with aggression and violence. Comments flooded in, condemning the officers' actions and calling for accountability. Local activists reached out to Marcus, offering support and urging him to share his story publicly. At first, Marcus hesitated. He didn't want to become the face of a movement. He just wanted justice. But as more people rallied behind him, he realized the power of his voice. By speaking up, he could shine a light on systemic issues that affected far too many. During this time, Marcus also leaned heavily on his dream of becoming a police officer. It might have seemed ironic to some. Why would someone subjected to such mistreatment still want to join law enforcement? For Marcus, though, it wasn't about revenge or proving a point. It was about being part of the solution. He believed deeply in the ideals of service, integrity, and fairness, even if the current system often fell short. So, while pursuing his complaint, Marcus continued training for the police academy. Early mornings were spent running laps around the park, afternoons dedicated to studying criminal justice textbooks, and evenings practicing tactical drills. His resolve grew stronger with each passing day. As public pressure mounted, the department issued a brief statement acknowledging the misunderstanding, but stopped short of apologizing or taking responsibility. This lack of accountability infuriated Marcus and his supporters. Protesters gathered outside the precinct, holding signs that read, "Justice for Marcus" and "Accountability Now." News outlets picked up the story, amplifying its reach beyond the local community. Even national figures weighed in, using Marcus's case as an example of the urgent need for reform within law enforcement. Despite the growing attention, Marcus remained focused on his goals. He attended town hall meetings, sharing his experience, and advocating for change. His calm yet passionate demeanor resonated with listeners, earning him respect and admiration. People began referring to him as a symbol of resilience, a man who refused to let bitterness consume him. Yet beneath his composed exterior, Marcus carried the weight of what had happened. Sleepless nights became common as memories of the assault replayed in his mind. Still, he pressed on, driven by the belief that his struggle could lead to something meaningful. At home, his family stood by him unwaveringly. His wife reminded him daily of his worth, encouraging him to stay strong. Their children, though young, sensed the tension in the air but trusted their father's ability to fix things. One evening, as they sat together at the dinner table, Marcus's daughter asked, "Daddy, are you going to catch bad guys when you're a police officer?" Her innocent question brought a smile to his face. "Yes, sweetheart," he replied. "But I'm also going to help good people feel safe again." By the time Marcus received confirmation that he'd been accepted into the police academy, the momentum surrounding his case had reached new heights. The officers involved had been temporarily reassigned pending an internal review, though no official charges had been filed against them. Many viewed this as a half-hearted attempt to appease public anger rather than address the root problem. Marcus chose not to dwell on it. Instead, he poured all his energy into preparing for the challenges ahead. Training at the academy was grueling, both physically and mentally. Long hours of exercise tested his endurance, while classroom sessions challenged his understanding of laws and ethics. There were moments when doubt crept in. Could he truly make a difference in a system riddled with flaws? But whenever those thoughts surfaced, Marcus remembered why he started. He thought about the faces of the people who had stood up for him, the strangers who had shared his story, and the loved ones who believed in him unconditionally. These reminders fueled his perseverance. Throughout the months of training, Marcus maintained a low profile, avoiding media appearances and focusing solely on his studies. However, whispers of his past followed him wherever he went. Fellow cadets occasionally glanced at him curiously, wondering if the rumors were true. Was this really the same Marcus Thompson whose name had been splashed across headlines? Though some treated him with cautious respect, others kept their distance, unsure of how to approach him. Marcus paid little attention to these dynamics. He wasn't there to win popularity contests, he was there to earn his badge. As graduation day approached, Marcus reflected on how far he'd come. From the night he was wrongfully arrested to the countless hours spent fighting for justice, every obstacle had shaped him into the person he was today. He knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy. Becoming a police officer meant stepping into a world fraught with complexities and contradictions. But Marcus was ready. He understood that real change didn't happen overnight. It required patience, persistence, and courage. And as he stood on the cusp of fulfilling his dream, Marcus felt a renewed sense of purpose. Whatever lay ahead, he vowed to face it head-on, armed with the lessons of his past and the hope of a better future. The day of Marcus's graduation from the police academy arrived, and it was nothing short of monumental. The ceremony took place in a large auditorium filled with rows of proud families, friends, and mentors. Balloons adorned the stage, and a banner hung high above that read, "Class of 20XX Guardians of Justice." For Marcus, this moment was more than just a personal milestone. It was a testament to his resilience, determination, and unwavering belief in doing what was right. As he walked into the venue wearing his crisp uniform for the first time, Marcus couldn't help but feel a mix of emotions. Pride swelled in his chest as he thought about how far he'd come. From the night he was wrongfully arrested to the countless hours spent studying, training, and pushing through doubt. But alongside that pride lingered a deep sense of responsibility. He knew the badge pinned to his chest wasn't just a symbol of authority, it represented trust, accountability, and service. It was a promise to protect and serve without prejudice, something he intended to uphold no matter the challenges ahead. When his name was called during the ceremony, the room erupted in applause. His wife wiped away tears as she clapped, her eyes shining with pride. Their children waved excitedly from their seats, holding handmade signs that read, "We love you, Daddy." Even some of the instructors who had once doubted whether Marcus could handle the rigors of the program stood up to acknowledge his achievement. As he stepped onto the stage to receive his diploma, Marcus scanned the crowd, taking in every face. Each smile, each cheer felt like validation, not just for him but for everyone who had ever been told they didn't belong or weren't good enough. During the speeches portion of the event, Marcus was asked to deliver a few words on behalf of his graduating class. Standing at the podium, he took a deep breath, letting the weight of the moment settle over him. "When I started this journey," he began, his voice steady but filled with emotion, "I didn't know if I'd make it here. There were days when the obstacles seemed insurmountable, when the system felt stacked against me. But today I stand before you not because I'm perfect, but because I refuse to give up." He paused, looking out at the sea of faces. Being a police officer isn't about power or control. It's about serving others with integrity and compassion. It's about being the person someone can turn to when they're scared or lost. And it's about recognizing that we're all human, capable of making mistakes, but also capable of change. His words resonated deeply with those in attendance, earning a standing ovation. Many nodded in agreement, while others wiped away tears. Marcus's speech wasn't just inspiring. It was a call to action, a reminder of why they had chosen this path in the first place. When he finished speaking, several cadets approached him afterward to shake his hand, thanking him for putting into words what so many of them had been feeling but couldn't articulate. After the ceremony, Marcus posed for photos with his family, his fellow graduates, and even some of the instructors. Everyone wanted a piece of him, eager to celebrate his success. Yet amid the joy and excitement, there was an undercurrent of tension. Somewhere in the back of his mind, Marcus couldn't forget the two officers who had assaulted him months earlier, the very ones who still worked within the same department he was now joining. Though he hadn't seen them since that fateful night, he knew their presence loomed large. Would they recognize him? Would they try to intimidate him? These questions lingered, but Marcus pushed them aside for now. Today was about celebrating his accomplishments, not dwelling on past grievances. A few days later, Marcus reported to his assigned precinct for his first official day on the job. The building buzzed with activity as officers bustled about, attending briefings, filing reports, and preparing for patrols. Marcus introduced himself to his new colleagues, shaking hands and exchanging pleasantries. Most greeted him warmly, welcoming him to the team. But there was a noticeable chill from a few individuals, those who had heard rumors about the rookie with the controversial backstory. Some whispered behind closed doors, speculating about how long he'd last. Others avoided eye contact altogether, unsure of how to interact with him. Despite the mixed reception, Marcus remained focused. He attended orientation sessions, reviewed protocols, and familiarized himself with the area he'd be patrolling. His supervisor, Sergeant Collins, seemed particularly invested in his success. A seasoned officer known for her fairness and dedication, Collins took Marcus under her wing, offering guidance and advice. "You've got a tough road ahead of you," she admitted during one of their conversations. "But I see potential in you, Marcus. Don't let anyone dim your light." Marcus appreciated her support, knowing he'd need allies like her in the days to come. Still, he couldn't shake the feeling that trouble was brewing beneath the surface. Rumors spread quickly in tight-knit environments like police departments, and Marcus suspected it was only a matter of time before word of his arrival reached the ears of the two officers who had wronged him. Sure enough, whispers began circulating among the ranks. One afternoon, as Marcus sat in the break room reviewing patrol routes, he overheard two officers talking in hushed tones nearby. "Did you hear? That guy who got roughed up by Jenkins and Harris is here now," one of them said. "Yeah, I heard," the other replied. "Guess karma's biting them in the butt." Marcus pretended not to listen, keeping his focus on the map in front of him. But inside, his heart raced. He hadn't expected things to escalate so soon. Later that week, fate intervened in a way Marcus hadn't anticipated. During roll call, Sergeant Collins announced that Marcus would be paired with Officer Ramirez, a senior officer with years of experience, for his first patrol shift. While Marcus was grateful for the opportunity to learn from someone seasoned, he couldn't ignore the sinking feeling in his stomach. The patrol route assigned to them included the exact neighborhood where he had been assaulted, a coincidence too glaring to ignore. As they climbed into the patrol car, Ramirez glanced at Marcus with a knowing look. "First day jitters?" he asked casually. Marcus forced a smile. "Something like that," he replied. They drove in silence for a while, the hum of the engine filling the space between them. Outside, the streets looked familiar yet different. Buildings Marcus had passed countless times now carried a heavier significance. Every corner felt like a reminder of the past. Eventually, they arrived at the scene of a disturbance call, a minor dispute between neighbors that required mediation. As they stepped out of the car, Marcus spotted two figures approaching from the opposite direction. His breath caught in his throat. It was them. Jenkins and Harris, the very officers who had assaulted him months ago. They hadn't noticed him yet, their attention focused on Ramirez. But as Marcus stepped forward to assist, their eyes locked onto him. For a brief moment, time seemed to freeze. Recognition flickered across their faces, followed by shock. And then panic. Marcus stood tall, meeting their gaze with quiet confidence. The tables had turned, and they knew it. The air was thick with tension as Marcus stood face to face with Jenkins and Harris, the two officers who had wronged him months earlier. For a moment, it felt like the world had stopped spinning. The noisy street faded into the background, leaving only the sound of his own heartbeat pounding in his ears. His mind raced, but outwardly Marcus remained calm. He didn't flinch or raise his voice. Instead, he simply held their gaze, letting the weight of recognition sink in. Jenkins and Harris exchanged uneasy glances, their usual bravado crumbling under the pressure of the situation. They clearly hadn't expected to see Marcus here, especially not in uniform. Their faces betrayed a mix of disbelief and fear, as if they were seeing a ghost from their past mistakes come back to haunt them. Harris opened his mouth to say something, then closed it again, unsure of what words might save. Him now. Jenkins, on the other hand, tried to mask his discomfort by straightening his posture and clearing his throat. Officer Ramirez, unaware of the history between Marcus and the two men, broke the awkward silence. "Everything okay here?" he asked, looking between them. Marcus nodded slowly, his expression unreadable. "Yes, sir," he replied evenly. "Just sorting out the details of the call." His tone was professional, almost detached, giving no hint of the storm brewing beneath the surface. Harris forced a laugh, though it sounded hollow even to his own ears. "Well, ain't this a surprise," he said, attempting to play off the encounter as casual. "Didn't think we'd run into you again so soon." The comment hung in the air, heavy with unspoken meaning. Marcus tilted his head slightly, his piercing eyes locking onto Harris's. "Small world," he responded coolly, his voice steady. "But I guess that's how things work when you're all part of the same team." The word team lingered for a moment, dripping with irony. Marcus knew full well that these men had never considered him an equal before. Not when they mistook him for someone else, not when they assaulted him without cause, and certainly not when they dismissed his protests as resistance. Now standing there in uniform, Marcus embodied everything they had underestimated about him: strength, resilience, and an unwavering commitment to justice. Jenkins finally spoke up, his voice tinged with nervousness. "Look, man, let's just focus on the job, all right? No need to make this personal." It was clear he was trying to regain control of the situation, but his attempt fell flat. Marcus raised an eyebrow, feigning mild curiosity. "Personal?" he echoed softly. "I'm just doing my job, same as everyone else. Isn't that what we're supposed to do?" His words struck a nerve. Jenkins shifted uncomfortably, while Harris avoided eye contact altogether. Both men seemed acutely aware that they were on shaky ground. In that moment, Marcus realized something powerful. He held the upper hand. These men, who once wielded their authority recklessly, now looked at him with thinly veiled panic. They weren't sure how much he remembered, how much evidence existed, or whether he intended to use this moment to expose them. And that uncertainty made them vulnerable. Ramirez, still oblivious to the underlying drama, gestured toward the disturbance call. "Let's get moving, folks," he said briskly. "We've got work to do." With that, the group turned their attention back to the task at hand. But the dynamic had shifted irrevocably. As they approached the scene, a heated argument between neighbors over a property line dispute, Marcus took charge seamlessly. He listened patiently to both sides, asking thoughtful questions and offering solutions that diffused the tension. His professionalism shone through every action, earning nods of approval from Ramirez and wary glances from Jenkins and Harris. Throughout the interaction, Marcus maintained a composed demeanor, refusing to give in to any temptation to confront. the two officers directly. He understood that revenge wasn't the answer. It would only drag him down to their level. Instead, he focused on demonstrating exactly why he deserved to wear the badge. Every decision he made, every word he spoke, reinforced his integrity and competence. By the time the dispute was resolved, even Jenkins and Harris couldn't deny that Marcus had handled the situation flawlessly. As the group returned to the patrol car, the atmosphere remained tense but subdued. Jenkins and Harris kept their distance, speaking in low tones whenever they thought Marcus wasn't listening. At one point, Harris muttered something about bad timing, and this coming back to bite us. Marcus pretended not to hear, but inside, he allowed himself a small smile. Justice, he realized, had a way of finding its path, even if it took longer than expected. Later that evening, after wrapping up his shift, Marcus sat alone in the locker room, reflecting on the day's events. The adrenaline had worn off, leaving behind a sense of quiet satisfaction. He hadn't sought out this confrontation, but neither had he backed down. By staying true to his principles, he had sent a message, not just to Jenkins and Harris, but to anyone who doubted his ability to rise above adversity. Word of the encounter spread quickly within the precinct. Other officers began piecing together the connection between Marcus and the infamous incident from months ago. Some expressed admiration for how professionally he had handled the situation, while others whispered warnings to Jenkins and Harris about the potential fallout. Rumors swirled, and soon higher-ups within the department caught wind of what had happened. For Jenkins and Harris, the reunion with Marcus marked the beginning of the end. Their behavior during the initial assault had already raised red flags, thanks to the public outcry and internal investigations sparked by Marcus's complaint. Now, with fresh scrutiny looming, they found themselves scrambling to defend their actions. Their once cocky attitudes gave way to paranoia, as they realized the walls were closing in. Marcus, meanwhile, continued his duties with quiet determination. He knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy. There would always be people like Jenkins and Harris, those who clung to outdated beliefs and abused their power. But he also knew that change started with individuals willing to challenge the status quo. Each step he took, each life he touched, brought him closer to the future he envisioned. A world where trust between law enforcement and the community wasn't just a dream, but a reality. That night, as Marcus drove home in his own car, still wearing his uniform, he felt a profound sense of purpose. The journey had been long and painful, but it had led him to this moment. He was no longer the man who had been wrongfully arrested on a quiet street corner. He was Officer Marcus Thompson, a symbol of hope, resilience, and the possibility of redemption for himself, for his community, and perhaps even for those who had once wronged him. The days following Marcus's encounter with Jenkins and Harris at the disturbance call felt like a turning point, not just for him, but for the entire precinct. Word of the tense reunion spread quickly among officers, sparking hushed conversations in hallways, break rooms, and patrol cars. Some viewed Marcus as a hero, quietly admiring his composure and professionalism despite the circumstances. Others saw him as a threat, fearing that his presence would expose cracks in the system they had long taken for granted. For Jenkins and Harris, however, the encounter was nothing short of a nightmare. It didn't take long for higher-ups within the department to catch wind of what had happened. Sergeant Collins, who had been keeping a close eye on Marcus since his arrival, immediately reported the incident to Internal Affairs. She knew better than anyone how delicate the situation was, and how important it was to handle it carefully. "We can't sweep this under the rug," she told her superior during a private meeting. "If we do, it'll only reinforce the idea that accountability doesn't exist here." Her concerns were echoed by others within the department who recognized the need for transparency. With mounting public pressure from Marcus's original complaint months earlier, combined with the recent encounter now making waves internally, the case against Jenkins and Harris gained new urgency. Investigators began digging deeper, reviewing evidence, interviewing witnesses, and re-examining the events surrounding Marcus's wrongful arrest. For Jenkins and Harris, the investigation felt like a noose tightening around their necks. They became increasingly paranoid, jumping at every knock on their office door or summons to meet with superiors. Their usual swagger disappeared, replaced by furtive glances and whispered consultations in corners. They tried to downplay their actions, insisting that the altercation with Marcus had been a simple misunderstanding. "We were doing our job," Harris argued during one particularly heated meeting with Internal Affairs. "How were we supposed to know he wasn't the guy?" But the evidence painted a damning picture. Videos recorded by bystanders showed clearly that Marcus had posed no threat and had cooperated fully before being assaulted. Witness testimonies corroborated his account, describing the officer's behavior as unnecessarily aggressive and racially motivated. Even fellow officers who had initially defended Jenkins and Harris started distancing themselves as the truth came to light. The pair found themselves isolated, their once unquestioned authority crumbling under scrutiny. Meanwhile, Marcus continued going about his duties with unwavering professionalism. He refused to let the drama consume him, focusing instead on building trust with the community he served. During patrols, he took extra time to speak with residents, listen to their concerns, and offer assistance whenever possible. His calm demeanor and genuine compassion earned him respect not only from civilians but also from colleagues who had initially doubted him. Slowly but surely, Marcus began changing perceptions, not just about himself but about what it meant to be a police officer. One evening, while responding to a domestic dispute call, Marcus encountered a young mother who recognized him from news reports. Her eyes widened in surprise as she approached him. "You're that officer, aren't you?" she asked hesitantly. Marcus nodded, offering her a reassuring smile. "Yes, ma'am. I'm Officer Thompson." The woman hesitated for a moment, then shook her head. "I never thought I'd see someone like you in uniform after everything you went through, but I guess that's why you're here, huh? To show us things can be different?" Her words struck a chord deep within Marcus. He realized that his journey wasn't just about personal vindication. It was about proving to people like her that change was possible, that justice could prevail, even in the face of overwhelming odds. It was a heavy responsibility, but one he embraced wholeheartedly. Back at the station, the investigation into Jenkins and Harris reached its climax. After weeks of gathering evidence and conducting interviews, Internal Affairs presented their findings to the department's leadership. The report left little room for interpretation. Jenkins and Harris had violated protocol, abused their power, and acted with reckless disregard for the rights of an innocent citizen. Their actions were deemed unacceptable, tarnishing the reputation of the force and eroding public trust. Faced with irrefutable proof, the department had no choice but to act. Jenkins and Harris were suspended indefinitely pending further disciplinary measures, including potential termination and criminal charges. News of their suspension sent shockwaves through the precinct. Some officers expressed relief, glad to see accountability finally enforced. Others grumbled about overreactions and political correctness, clinging to outdated notions of authority. But for many rank-and-file members, the decision served as a wake-up call, a reminder that the badge carried responsibilities as much as it did privileges. Marcus learned of the suspensions during a briefing led by Captain Reynolds, who addressed the entire team. "This is a difficult moment for all of us," the captain began, his tone somber yet resolute. "But it's also an opportunity to reflect on our values, reaffirm our commitment to integrity, and rebuild the trust we've lost. We owe it to ourselves, to each other, and most importantly to the communities we serve." As the room fell silent, Marcus felt a surge of mixed emotions. Satisfaction, yes, but also sadness. He couldn't help but think about the countless others who might have suffered similar injustices without ever finding resolution. Still, he knew this was progress. By holding Jenkins and Harris accountable, the department had taken a crucial step toward reform. And though the road ahead remained long and uncertain, Marcus believed deeply in the power of incremental change. In the days that followed, Marcus received messages of support from unexpected places. Fellow officers who had once kept their distance now approached him with handshakes and words of encouragement. Community leaders praised him for his courage and resilience, calling him a beacon of hope. Even strangers stopped him on the street to thank him for standing up against injustice. Each gesture reinforced his belief that his struggles hadn't been in vain. Yet amidst the praise and recognition, Marcus remained grounded. He understood that true justice wasn't about revenge or punishment. It was about creating a system where such abuses of power could no longer thrive. Determined to contribute to that vision, he volunteered to lead workshops on implicit bias and de-escalation techniques for new recruits. Drawing from his own experiences, he emphasized the importance of empathy, communication, and accountability. We're human beings first, he often reminded cadets, and sometimes remembering that makes all the difference. As weeks turned into months, life at the precinct began to shift. Conversations that had once been taboo, about race, privilege, and systemic inequities, became part of daily discourse. Officers started questioning old practices and advocating for reforms. While change didn't happen overnight, small victories accumulated over time, fostering a culture of openness and introspection. For Marcus, these developments were both heartening and humbling. He knew he hadn't single-handedly transformed the department, but he had played a role in sparking meaningful dialogue. And in doing so, he had proven that even the darkest moments could yield light if met with courage and conviction. Late one night, as Marcus sat alone in his patrol car, he reflected on how far he'd come. From the humiliation of wrongful arrest to the triumph of wearing the badge, his journey had been anything but easy. Yet through it all, he had stayed true to his values, refusing to let bitterness or despair define him. As he looked out at the quiet streets bathed in moonlight, Marcus allowed himself a rare moment of pride. He wasn't just an officer, he was a symbol of resilience, a testament to the power of perseverance and a living reminder that justice, though delayed, was never truly denied. Months had passed since the suspensions of Jenkins and Harris, and the ripple effects of their downfall continued to reshape the precinct and Marcus's life. What had started as a personal ordeal had grown into something far greater, a catalyst for change within the department and the community it served. Marcus found himself at the center of this transformation, not because he sought the spotlight, but because his story embodied the struggles and aspirations of so many who yearned for justice. Word of Marcus's dedication to reform spread beyond the confines of the precinct. Local newspapers wrote articles about him, highlighting his journey from victim to officer and his efforts to bridge the gap between law enforcement and marginalized communities. Television stations invited him to share his experiences on morning talk shows, where he spoke candidly about the importance of accountability and empathy in policing. At first, Marcus hesitated to embrace the media attention. He didn't want to be seen as a celebrity or a symbol, but he soon realized the platform gave him an opportunity to amplify voices that often went unheard. One particularly memorable interview took place on a popular national news program. The host, a seasoned journalist known for asking tough questions, began by acknowledging the challenges Marcus had faced. "Officer Thompson," she said, leaning forward slightly, "you endured something no one should ever have to go through. And yet here you are, working to make the system better. What drives you?" Marcus paused, collecting his thoughts before responding. "It's simple, really," he said with a small smile. "I believe in second chances, not just for individuals, but for institutions. Our system isn't perfect, we all know that. But if we're willing to listen, learn, and grow, then there's hope for real change. That's what keeps me going." His answer resonated deeply with viewers, sparking a wave of support across social media. Hashtags like #Justice with Marcus and Change from Within trended nationwide, drawing attention to the broader issues plaguing law enforcement. Activists reached out to collaborate with Marcus, eager to leverage his influence to push for policy reforms. Meanwhile, aspiring officers looked to him as proof that integrity and determination could overcome even the most daunting obstacles. Back at work, Marcus continued leading workshops and mentoring new recruits. His sessions were unlike any other. Training programs, they weren't just about tactics or procedures but about mindset. He encouraged cadets to see themselves not as enforcers of rules, but as servants of the people. When you put on this uniform, he would tell them, you're making a promise to protect, to serve, and to respect every individual you encounter. That's a big responsibility, but it's also a privilege. The impact of his teachings became evident in subtle yet significant ways. Recruits began approaching their duties with greater sensitivity and awareness. Complaints against rookie officers dropped noticeably, while positive feedback from citizens increased. Even veteran members of the force admitted they had learned valuable lessons from Marcus's approach. Slowly but surely, the culture of the department shifted toward one of collaboration and mutual respect. Outside of work, Marcus remained deeply connected to his family and community. His wife often joked that he was becoming a local hero, pointing out how strangers greeted him warmly at grocery stores or stopped him on the street to express gratitude. Their children, too, took immense pride in their father's accomplishments. One evening, as they sat together watching a documentary about police reform, Marcus's son turned to him and asked, "Daddy, does this mean bad cops can't hurt people anymore?" Marcus knelt down to meet his son's gaze, choosing his words carefully. "Not yet," he replied gently. "But we're working on it. Every day, good people are standing up and saying, 'Enough is enough,' and that's how things get better, little by little." Though progress was undeniable, Marcus knew the fight was far from over. There were still pockets of resistance within the department, officers clinging stubbornly to outdated practices and attitudes. Some openly criticized Marcus's methods, accusing him of being too soft or overly idealistic. Others resented the scrutiny brought on by recent reforms, viewing it as an attack on their profession. Marcus understood their frustrations but refused to let negativity derail his mission. Instead, he focused on fostering dialogue, encouraging open conversations about fear, bias, and the evolving role of law enforcement in society. One afternoon, during a community outreach event organized by the precinct, Marcus encountered a man who challenged him directly. Standing near a table displaying informational pamphlets, the man crossed his arms and fixed Marcus with a skeptical glare. "You think wearing that badge makes you different?" he demanded. "How do we know you? Won't end up like those other guys?" Marcus met the man's gaze without flinching. "You don't," he admitted honestly, "and I wouldn't expect you to trust me blindly. Trust has to be earned. It takes time, consistency, and action. All I can do is show up every day, do my job with integrity, and hope that eventually people will see I'm on their side." The man studied him for a moment, then nodded slowly. "Fair enough," he muttered before walking away. Though the exchange was brief, it reminded Marcus of the importance of humility and patience. Building trust wasn't a quick fix. It required sustained effort and genuine connection. As years passed, Marcus's legacy grew. He rose through the ranks, earning promotions based on merit and leadership rather than politics. Along the way, he spearheaded initiatives aimed at recruiting diverse candidates, improving transparency, and strengthening ties with underserved neighborhoods. Under his guidance, the department implemented body cameras, mandatory bias training, and community advisory boards, all measures designed to hold officers accountable and foster public confidence. But perhaps Marcus's greatest achievement was the inspiration he provided to others. Young men and women who had once felt alienated by law enforcement now saw themselves reflected in him. They applied to join the force, driven by the belief that they too could make a difference. Many cited Marcus as their role model, crediting him with reigniting their faith in the possibility of a fairer, kinder world. On the 5th anniversary of his graduation from the academy, Marcus stood once again in the same auditorium where he had received his diploma. This time, however, he wasn't there as a graduate. He was the keynote speaker addressing a new class of cadets. As he walked onto the stage, applause erupted, echoing off the walls. Looking out at the sea of eager faces, Marcus felt a surge of emotion. These were the future guardians of justice, the next generation tasked with carrying the torch. "I want to tell you a story," he began, his voice steady, but filled with passion. "It's about a man who dreamed of serving his community but faced obstacles he never imagined. It's about pain, perseverance, and the power of hope. Most importantly, it's about believing in something bigger than yourself, even when the odds seem insurmountable. He paused, letting his words sink in. Each of you has chosen this path for your own reasons. Maybe you want to protect, to help, or to heal. Whatever your motivation, remember this. You hold the potential to shape the future of policing, for better or worse. The decisions you make, the relationships you build, and the values you uphold will define not only your careers but the lives of countless others. As he concluded his speech, Marcus looked out at the audience one last time. Never forget why you started, he said softly, and never stop fighting for the world you want to create. The room erupted in cheers, the sound reverberating, like a promise, a pledge to carry forward the ideals Marcus had championed. Later that evening, as Marcus drove home under a starlit sky, he allowed himself a rare moment of reflection. The road behind him had been long and difficult, marked by pain and triumph alike. But the road ahead? That stretched endlessly, full of possibilities. Marcus knew he couldn't control everything. There would always be setbacks and challenges. But as long as he stayed true to his principles, he believed the future could be brighter than the past. For Marcus Thompson, the journey had been about more than vindication or revenge. It had been about proving that resilience could light the darkest paths, that integrity could inspire change, and that one person's courage could spark a movement. And though his story was far from finished, he knew it would continue to resonate for his family, his colleagues, and generations to come.